Iga Swiatek arrived in Toronto carrying a season that had felt strangely unfamiliar. The player who once seemed almost impossible to stop had spent 2026 searching for answers, dealing with criticism, and watching important tournaments pass without another trophy. Then, in one final performance, she reminded everyone exactly why she is one of the most feared players in women's tennis. Swiatek has won 6 Grand Slam titles, but before this week she had not reached a final all year. Her Wimbledon title defense ended in the 3rd round, and the constant conversation around her form created a different kind of pressure. Toronto, however, became the place where that story changed. The former world number 1 defeated Elena Rybakina 6-2, 6-3 to capture the WTA 1000 title, and the scoreline tells only part of the story. Swiatek did not simply survive a difficult final. She controlled it from the opening exchanges, forcing Rybakina to defend, move, and solve problems when the Kazakh-born Australian simply did not have enough energy left. That physical factor mattered. Rybakina had already played an exhausting tournament. 4 of her 5 matches before the final had gone 3 sets, and her semi-final against Coco Gauff finished around 1 in the morning. By the time she walked onto court for the championship match, the question was not whether she had the power to trouble Swiatek. It was whether she had enough fuel to use it. The answer arrived almost immediately. Rybakina opened the match with 2 double faults and handed Swiatek an early break. Against a player like Swiatek, that is almost the worst possible start. Iga thrives when she gets ahead because it allows her to dictate the rhythm. She can absorb pace with her defense, extend rallies, and then suddenly turn a neutral exchange into an attacking opportunity. Rybakina did manage to settle down. She held her next 2 service games comfortably and created 2 break chances in the 6th game. That moment could have changed the first set. Swiatek, though, stayed composed, escaped the danger, and immediately put the pressure back on her opponent. She broke again for 5-2 and then served out the set without losing a point. The final shot was particularly fitting. A swerving second serve winner that gave Swiatek the set after just over 20 minutes. That was the moment the final began to feel less like a contest and more like a demonstration of control. The second set followed a similar pattern. Rybakina tried to stay aggressive, but Swiatek was reading the court beautifully. Her movement kept turning Rybakina's powerful shots into longer rallies, and once the exchanges extended, Iga increasingly looked like the fresher player. Swiatek broke for a 3-2 advantage, and from there she never allowed the match to drift away from her. Rybakina continued fighting, but the errors began to tell the story. Balls that normally would have been clean winners or deep attacking shots were finding the net or missing their targets. Swiatek eventually reached match point and needed only one more opportunity. On her second match point, she produced a backhand winner to break again and close the championship in straight sets. For Rybakina, the defeat was disappointing, but her assessment was remarkably honest. She admitted that she simply did not have enough energy and said she could feel herself failing to push with her legs. She also pointed to unforced errors and lapses in concentration. That explanation matters because it gives credit to both players. Swiatek was excellent, but Rybakina was also clearly running on empty. The semi-final against Gauff had demanded everything from her, and the late finish left little time for recovery before the biggest match of the tournament. Still, fatigue does not erase what Swiatek accomplished. Winning a WTA 1000 title requires consistency, and Swiatek found it at exactly the right moment. Her serve was efficient, her defense was disciplined, and her attacks arrived when the openings appeared. She did not need to overpower Rybakina. Instead, she made the match uncomfortable and forced her opponent to generate more and more of the game herself. That is one of the most dangerous qualities in Swiatek's tennis. She can make an opponent feel as though every point requires something extra. And perhaps the biggest victory in Toronto was not the trophy itself. It was what the trophy represented. Swiatek has spoken about how difficult this season has been, especially with the opinions and criticism surrounding her online. After winning, she made it clear that she had not ignored those voices. She had felt them, but instead of allowing them to define her, she focused on changing parts of her game and continuing to improve. Her message after the final was powerful because it went beyond tennis. She dedicated the title to people dealing with judgment and hate, encouraging them to keep growing and remember what might still be possible. That sounds like a simple message, but coming from a player who has spent years under intense expectations, it carries real weight. There is also a major ranking consequence. Swiatek entered Toronto ranked 8th in the world, but this title will push her back into the top 5. That means she is heading into Cincinnati with renewed momentum, and the timing could hardly be better. Cincinnati is important because Swiatek will be defending her title there. Then comes the US Open, where the pressure will rise again and the tennis world will be watching closely. Suddenly, the conversation around Swiatek has changed. A few weeks ago, the questions were about what had gone wrong. Now the more interesting question is what happens if Toronto is the beginning of a comeback rather than a one-week revival. For Rybakina, the tournament still represents a significant step forward. She is moving closer to Aryna Sabalenka at the top of the rankings, even though she insists she is not thinking much about becoming world number 1. She admitted that reaching the top would mean a lot, but right now it still feels far away to her. That mindset may actually help. Rankings can become a distraction, especially when every match carries consequences. Rybakina knows she has the game to challenge the best. Her run in Toronto showed that, but she also learned how important recovery and physical preparation can be during a demanding tournament. For Swiatek, the lesson is different. She has rediscovered something more valuable than confidence. Proof. Proof that her game can still dominate. Proof that adjustments can work. And proof that a difficult season does not have to become the final chapter of the story. Toronto gave Iga Swiatek her first title of 2026 and her 12th WTA 1000 crown. More importantly, it gave her a platform to rebuild from. Now comes Cincinnati. Then the US Open. Suddenly, the rest of the season looks much more interesting than before. So the big question is simple. Was this just a brilliant week in Toronto? Or did we just watch the start of Iga Swiatek's second half surge? Tell us what you think in the comments. Can Swiatek carry this momentum into Cincinnati and the US Open? And could she return to the very top before the season ends?